Production in the USA due to tariffs. Their assembly lines are shut down on May 12th, and it is Mazda. They make them in Alabama for the Canadian market, and they say they're not going to make any more for the Canadian market until, something is done about these tariffs.
Did you know Mazda only sold about 14,000 CX-50s in Canada last year, compared to 45,000 in the United States? This seemingly small detail explains everything about their recent factory shutdown decision that's making headlines. Today, we're exploring how targeted tariffs are reshaping the North American automotive landscape overnight, forcing companies like Mazda and Stellantis to make sudden, dramatic production changes. While some factories are going dark, others are ramping up, creating a new automotive map that will determine which models survive and which disappear from showrooms forever. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video.
Mazda confirmed that it's going to halt production of CX-50 Mazda vehicles that are bound for Canada. Mazda says they're going to stop May 12th on the Huntsville, Alabama plant. That's where they build the CX-50 car for North American market.
Remember when buying a car was just about comparing features and prices? That world is rapidly disappearing as tariffs reshape everything we know about the auto industry. What we're witnessing right now is nothing short of a fundamental transformation of the North American automotive landscape. For decades, the automotive industry across the United States, Canada, and Mexico functioned like a precisely calibrated machine. Under the USMCA agreement, which replaced NAFTA, vehicles and parts flowed freely across borders without financial penalties. This wasn't just convenient, it was the backbone of an entire industry's business model. Manufacturers didn't see three separate countries. They saw one massive integrated market where production could be optimized based on efficiency rather than arbitrary political boundaries. Take Mazda's Alabama plant as a perfect example. When Mazda poured $1.6 billion into this facility, they weren't just building another factory, they were creating a manufacturing hub specifically designed to serve both American and Canadian customers seamlessly. The CX-50, one of Mazda's most promising crossover models, was exclusively manufactured at this location with the clear intention of distributing it throughout North America without any trade barriers or complications. What made this system truly remarkable was its intricate choreography. A single vehicle might have components that crossed borders multiple times during production. A steering system might start with raw materials from Mexico, undergo initial processing in the US, receive electronic components in Canada, and then return to the US for final installation. This wasn't inefficiency, it was strategic specialization that allowed each facility to focus on what it did best, ultimately creating better vehicles at lower costs. And Mazda wasn't alone in this approach. Companies like Stellantis, the parent company of brands like Jeep, Ram, and Chrysler, engineered their entire production networks around this border-free concept. Factories were strategically positioned based on logistical advantages and workforce expertise rather than political considerations. The assumption of tariff-free movement wasn't just a nice bonus, it was literally built into the foundation of these multi-billion-dollar facilities. For consumers, this system created a remarkably consistent experience across North America. Whether you shopped for a CX-50 in Detroit, Toronto, or Mexico City, you could expect similar pricing, availability, and options. The seamless market meant automakers could achieve economies of scale that kept prices competitive while maintaining quality. This predictability became something customers took for granted, a stability that's now vanishing before our eyes. Yet there were warning signs that this delicate system was vulnerable. The political winds had been shifting for years, with increasing rhetoric about trade imbalances and protecting domestic industries. Then came the pandemic, which exposed just how fragile global supply chains could be. Suddenly, the idea of depending on parts from across borders seemed risky rather than efficient. Still, few anticipated how quickly and dramatically the situation would change. Fast forward to today, and the reality at Mazda's Alabama plant tells the story of this new automotive world. The factory hasn't shut down completely, a crucial detail that many headlines overlook. Production continues for US-bound vehicles, but the assembly lines for Canadian-destined CX-50s have gone silent. It's a partial shutdown with total implications for how the industry operates moving forward. For Canadian consumers who had their hearts set on a brand new CX-50, the options are suddenly limited to whatever inventory already exists in Canadian dealerships. Once those vehicles sell out, there's no clear timeline for when or if new shipments will arrive. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a fundamental disruption of consumer expectations that had been built over decades. The most alarming aspect isn't the immediate disruption, but the speed at which it happened. Automakers designed their production and distribution networks years in advance. When tariffs suddenly appeared overnight, there was simply no time to adapt. Manufacturing facilities can't be relocated in weeks or even months. These are multi-year projects requiring billions in investment. The result? Companies like Mazda had to make snap decisions that prioritize their largest markets while abandoning smaller ones, at least temporarily. Those snap decisions weren't limited to Mazda, they triggered a domino effect that's still toppling through North America's automotive landscape. When a 25% tariff hits overnight, even manufacturing giants like Stellantis must make unthinkable choices that ripple across 3 countries, impacting thousands of workers who never saw it coming. This isn't just about shipping delays or minor price adjustments, it's about the fundamental restructuring of a continental production system that took decades to build. The 25% tariff that's causing all this chaos applies regardless of whether vehicles comply with local content rules established by the USMCA. This critical detail means even vehicles with substantial North American parts and labor are suddenly facing massive penalties when crossing borders. It's like changing the rules of the game in the middle of the 4th quarter. Companies had built their entire playbooks around one set of assumptions only to have them invalidated overnight. For Stellantis, the response has been both swift and dramatic. The company shuttered its Windsor assembly plant in Canada for 2 weeks, starting April 7th, while simultaneously closing the Toluca assembly plant in Mexico for an entire month. These closures weren't isolated events. They triggered temporary layoffs for 900 employees across 5 different US plants in Michigan and Indiana. Think about that for a second. Workers in Warren Stamping, Sterling Stamping, Indiana Transmission, Kokomo Transmission, and Kokomo Casting plants, facilities that don't even build complete vehicles, found themselves temporarily out of work because of a tariff on finished automobiles crossing borders. Antonio Filosa, Stellantis' chief operations officer for North America, didn't mince words about the situation, stating that immediate actions were necessary, including the temporary production pauses at Canadian and Mexican assembly plants. His emphasis on the urgency speaks volumes about how unprepared even industry giants were for this shift. What's particularly telling is how differently these tariffs impact automakers based on their production footprints. Companies with flexible manufacturing capabilities spread across all 3 countries face different challenges than those with concentrated production. Take Mazda, which now has a US market representing 45,000 CX-50 sales versus just 14,000 in Canada. The math becomes brutally simple. Continue serving the larger market while abandoning the smaller one, at least temporarily. This mathematical reality has forced automakers into inventory management gymnastics. Without new vehicles crossing borders, dealers are now playing a different game. How long can existing inventory sustain market demand? For Canadian dealers who've been cut off from Mazda's Alabama-built CX-50s, the clock is ticking as they sell down their remaining stock with no reinforcements on the way. For consumers, the ripple effects are just beginning to materialize. When supply chains fracture, 3 things inevitably happen. Prices rise, choices diminish, and market inequalities emerge. Canadian buyers who want certain models may soon face significantly higher prices or complete unavailability, while their American counterparts might see relatively little change for the same vehicles. This creates bizarre market distortions where identical products have dramatically different values based solely on which side of the border you're standing on. Behind the scenes, Stellantis is scrambling to adapt its manufacturing and supply chain networks. The company has already begun shifting more parts sourcing from Mexico to the US and encouraging dealers to submit vehicle orders for production. Doug Osterman, Stellantis' chief financial officer, has emphasized the importance of ongoing dialogue with the US government to help the industry achieve growth in localized vehicle production. These aren't just temporary adjustments, they represent the beginning of a fundamental restructuring of how vehicles are built and sold throughout North America. Companies are being forced to reconsider where they manufacture, how they distribute, and which markets make financial sense to serve. Antonio Filosa spoke to this new reality when he stressed the need for collective resilience and discipline to overcome these challenges, assuring that Stellantis would swiftly adapt to policy changes to protect its business. The most fascinating aspect of this disruption isn't the immediate pain, but the long-term adaptations now being set in motion. While today's headlines focus on shutdowns and layoffs, behind corporate doors, automotive executives are redrawing supply chains, reconsidering factory locations, and accelerating localization efforts that might ultimately create more resilient production networks. While the headlines might focus on factory shutdowns and worker layoffs, what's happening behind the scenes tells a different story. The automotive industry is already adapting through innovative lithium extraction processes that could reshape supply chains and reduce dependency on foreign sources. We're also seeing strategic consolidations, like the potential merger between Toyota's Hino Motors truck unit and Mitsubishi Fuso, creating stronger, more efficient operations. These adaptations aren't just reactive measures, they're transforming the entire automotive landscape. Smart consumers should look beyond the drama of temporary disruptions and understand these fundamental shifts. Those who recognize how the industry is evolving will make more informed vehicle purchasing decisions in this new automotive reality.